Well, come to beyond the surface. My name is Aaron, and for the past 17 years, I have been married to Kayla. Together, we had a 16-year-old daughter named Judy. I worked as a mechanical engineer at the local automobile factory, spending my days ensuring that machines ran smoothly and production stayed on track. It was an ordinary day until my phone buzzed in my pocket. Wiping the grease from my hands, I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen. It was Gordon, my neighbor. Strange. He rarely called me during work hours. A sudden unease crept into my stomach as I swiped to answer. "Aaron, you need to get home now." There was an urgency in his voice, something bordering on panic. My fingers tightened around the phone. "What's wrong?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "There's a moving van in front of your house. A couple of guys are loading furniture into it." My grip on the phone became vice-like. "What? Who the hell?" "I don't know," Gordon cut in. "But they're taking a lot of stuff. Your wife's there too. Thought you should know." "Kayla." My heart pounded against my ribs. "Are you sure?" "Positive. You better get here fast." I didn't waste another second. Shoving my phone into my pocket, I strode across the factory floor, my boots hitting the concrete with heavy determination. My mind raced with questions. Was this some kind of daylight burglary? Or was it something worse? Reaching my boss's office, I knocked once before pushing the door open. "Sir, I need to go right now." He looked up from his paperwork, his gruff but reasonable expression shifting to concern. "What's going on?" "There's a burglary at my house. My neighbor just called. Someone is loading my stuff into a moving van." His eyes widened. "Go. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. Spinning on my heel, I ran for the parking lot, my hands fumbling for my keys. I yanked open the car door, jumped inside, and started the engine. The tires screeched against the pavement as I tore out of the lot, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. As I neared my neighborhood, dread twisted in my gut. This wasn't just a burglary. And the fact that Kayla was there, that changed everything. I floored the gas. By the time I reached the house, my tires screeched as I slammed on the brakes. I barely registered turning off the engine before I threw the door open and stormed toward the driveway. My heart pounded as I took in the scene. Two men hauling furniture into the back of a moving van, while another man, tall and lean with a cocky stance, gave them instructions. "Hey, stop right there." I barked, marching toward them. The man barely spared me a glance before muttering under his breath, "Mind your damn business." That was all it took. Before I could even think, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling to the pavement. A sharp grunt escaped his lips as he hit the ground, but I wasn't done. Rage boiled over, and I pounced on him, my fists flying. "You think you can steal from me?" I growled, landing another punch. In broad daylight? Another punch. He groaned, trying to shield his face, but I wasn't about to let up. With one hand, I grabbed my phone and punched a 911, barely controlling my breathing. There's a man stealing from my home. I've subdued him. My knuckles were still clenched, ready to strike again. The dispatcher's voice was calm but firm. "Sir, I need you to step inside your home and lock the door. Officers are on their way." I let out a bitter laugh. I can handle myself. Suddenly, a shriek rang through the air. "Aaron, what the hell are you doing?" I turned my head and saw Kayla rushing toward us, her face twisted in shock. She dropped to her knees beside the man, her hands trembling as she touched his bruised jaw. "Why did you hit him?" she screamed at me, her voice filled with outrage. I blinked, momentarily thrown off by her reaction. "Do you know him?" She snapped her head up, eyes blazing. "Yes, he's my boyfriend." A cold wave of shock crashed over me. I felt the breath leave my lungs. "What?" That was all I managed before I drove my foot straight into his groin, making him curl up like a dying cockroach. "You're my wife." I spat, my voice shaking with fury. "And you have a damn boyfriend?" Kayla shrieked. "Stop it, Aaron. Stop." But I wasn't finished. My mind raced as I turned toward the moving van. Why is this one even here? I demanded. The man groaned. still cradling himself. His silence only fueled my anger. I kicked him again, a third time, just to drive the point home. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the two guys from the moving company standing near the truck, arms crossed, smirks on their faces as they watched the chaos unfold. I guess they were enjoying the show. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder until two police cruisers pulled up in front of the house. Officers stepped out, hands resting on their holsters as they took in the scene. Me standing over a battered man, Kayla crouched beside him, and the movers idly watching like spectators at a boxing match. One officer, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern face, quickly moved toward me, placing a firm hand on my chest to separate me from a man on the ground. "Step back, sir," he ordered. I clenched my fist but obeyed, taking a step back, still breathing heavily. "I'm the one who called you," I said, my voice laced with frustration. The officer raised an eyebrow. "That's so." "Yes," I snapped. "I got a call from my neighbors saying some guys were loading my furniture into a van. I rushed home and saw this guy." I gestured toward the groaning man still curled up on the pavement, directing them. The officer turned to Kayla. "Ma'am, what's going on here?" Kayla lifted her head, wiping her eyes before answering. "This man is Walter Anderson," she said, her voice wavering but determined. "He's my boyfriend." My stomach twisted at those words. I had already heard them, but hearing her say it again, so plainly, so unapologetically, felt like another punch to the gut. "I'm leaving, Aaron," she continued, her voice cold now, void of any emotion, "and I'm taking my half of the furniture." The officer studied her expression before sighing. "Mrs. Thompson, did you inform your husband that you were leaving?" Kayla hesitated. Then with a stubborn tilt of her chin, she said, "No." The officer let out a slow breath, rubbing his temple. "Ma'am, I need you to understand something. To take any of this furniture, you need to file for divorce first. After a judge orders the assets to be split, both parties will have to sign a legal document listing the assets under each name." Kayla's face paled slightly. "What you're doing right now," the officer continued, his tone sharpening, "is illegal. If your husband decides to file charges, this will be classified as theft." Kayla gasped, her face flashing with shock and frustration. The situation had taken a turn she wasn't expecting, but for me, it was just beginning. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her cheeks streaked with the evidence of her sorrow. But beneath the lingering pain, something had changed. There was a softness in her gaze now, a quiet thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. She sniffled, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and hesitated before looking up at me. "What about Mom?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain, as if she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. I exhaled, feeling the weight of the question settle heavily on my chest. A sad smile tugged at the corners of my lips. I had known this moment would come. It was inevitable. Gently, I reached out and tucked a stray strand of her hair behind her ear, an old habit of mine from when she was little. "Well," I began, my voice steady but tinged with sadness. "She made her choice. She chose to abandon me. She chose to abandon you. And she chose to move on with her life." Judy's lower lip trembled, but she didn't look away. She needed to hear this, no matter how much it hurt. The only thing we can do now is let fate decide. I continued, my words slow and deliberate. "There's no point in chasing someone who doesn't want to stay. But you know what?" I paused, waiting until her eyes met mine. "We should be grateful for what we still have. We have each other, and that means more than you realize." She frowned slightly, clearly trying to understand. Sensing her confusion, I softened my tone and tried again. "Think of it this way," I explained. "She never truly loved me, and in a way, that's a blessing. She spared me from living a lie, from spending my life with someone who never really cared. And as much as it hurts, she abandoned you too, which means she spared you from false hope. Now, all we have left is what's real. No lies, no betrayal, just the truth." Judy's eyes glistened with fresh tears, but something was different now. This time, the sadness wasn't just despair, it was acceptance. Slowly, she bit her lip, then, without warning, She lunged forward and threw her arms around me. She held on tightly, her small frame trembling slightly. It felt as though she was holding on to more than just me. She was holding on to the truth, to the reality she had fought so hard to ignore. "Thanks, Dad," she whispered, her voice muffled against my shirt. And just like that, something shifted between us. The months that followed were not easy, but they were ours. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm, one where the echoes of betrayal and abandonment faded a little more each day. Judy began to smile again, not the forced, hollow smile she used to give, but real ones. She was healing in her own way, and our bond had grown stronger because of it. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is, but it was real, and that was enough. Then, one bright afternoon, the front door suddenly burst open. Judy came rushing in, her eyes wide with excitement, her cheeks flushed as if she had just run the entire way home. I was sitting on the couch, a newspaper in my hands, when she practically skidded to a stop in front of me. "You won't believe what I just heard," she exclaimed, breathless. I arched an eyebrow, amused by her energy. "All right," I said, setting the newspaper aside. "Let's hear it." A slow, almost mischievous grin spread across her face. "That Walter guy, he beat the hell out of Mom." For a moment, I just stared at her, not quite sure I had heard correctly. Then, before I could stop myself, a short, amused laugh escaped me. It wasn't the right reaction, not the moral one, but after everything that had happened, I couldn't help it. Judy's eyes widened slightly at my reaction, but then, as the absurdity of it all sank in, she let out a small chuckle too. "Did you see that coming?" she asked, shaking her head in disbelief. I smirked, leaning back against the couch. "Judy, I was married to your mother for almost 2 decades. Trust me, listening to her whine every single day is a special kind of punishment." Her laughter grew, filling the room with a warmth we hadn't felt in a long time. "I guess their fairy tale was written by the Brothers Grimm," I added dryly. Judy snorted at that, covering her mouth, but then her expression sobered as a new thought occurred to her. "So, how is she?" she asked hesitantly. "In the hospital," she said after a pause. Then, with a hint of satisfaction, she added, "And Walter? He's in jail." I exhaled through my nose and nodded. "Figures." Judy tilted her head, slightly thoughtful. "I have a feeling she'll be calling soon." Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps approaching caught our attention. Maria walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, the smell of home-cooked food lingering in the air. She had been making dinner, but now she looked between the two of us, curiosity flickering in her warm brown eyes. "Did I miss something?" she asked, glancing between me and Judy. Judy turned to her, a soft, knowing smile curving her lips. "Nope," she said simply, her voice light but certain. "You didn't miss anything, Mom." And in that moment, I realized our story had already moved on. Dear listeners, what are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.